Hey guys, EDDBUD here and welcome back to the channel. Every so often a shoe appears out of nowhere. It arrives on the scene unannounced, slim on details, with no fanfare whatsoever. One of those such shoes we're going to look at today. It's the New Balance Fuelcell Speedrift. Speedrift. It's something like that. What to make of this shoe? I think interesting design nods to New Balance's 5280, that carbon plate shoe, that sort of mild shoe that they created and released last year. This apparently has a 6mm drop. There's a part booty construction to this shoe, more of a textile upper rather than a mesh, Fuelcell midsole, and depending which bits you believe on the New Balance website, there is a part Pebax plate in the midsole, but then another bit says it's a full-length plate, so who knows? Certainly some interesting traction here. A weight of 290 grams or 10.4 ounces in my UK size 11.5. That relates to a US size 12 in New Balance sizing. How does it fare? So let's look at the upper first. This shoe is categorized on New Balance's site as a competition race day shoe. There's certainly some interesting design choices here. Gotta say, the toe box is quite nice and soft inside. On the outside it does feel a little coarse, but inside the shoe it's a different story. There's some leather effect pieces here up towards the ankle area of the shoe, and on the back as well, around the heel you've got this kind of leather effect stuff. Very odd. I gotta say, I'm not a massive fan of this pull tab here. You do feel it on the back of your ankle, and I think I might try and stick it back down like this. It just kind of felt irritating and odd. The heel counter here is extremely minimal. It only really comes up to where the leather effect piece is. It's really quite minimal. Not much there. I'm not sure what to make of these wild fly-like iridescent logos on either side of the shoe. It reminds me of the top on the tongue on the Fuelcell TC. It had the same kind of colouring. Laces have a little bit of spring to them, and I did find lockdown to be excellent in this shoe. You got quite a considerable amount of padding just under the area where you fasten the shoes. As I say, superb lockdown from this shoe, really good. There are two sets of flywire type cords here. They don't go all the way down the sides of the shoe as you'd get in Nike's setup. I think they've mothballed that system now. They've got those lace loops that go either side of the shoe that don't really tighten the shoe up that well. Sorry, that 37 just ain't working for me. And I know viewer Kev Burton's actually sent his Pegasus 37s back. He just couldn't get a reasonable lockdown. Upper's certainly very light on foot. Lighter than the TC, that's for certain. I think there are nods to the TC in this shoe, but for me, dare I say it, it was closer to the Zoomfly 3. Only upper-wise. Is that pull tab really necessary? The tongue? It's just a little weird, all this extra fabric. Do we need it? Again, it just feels like there's too much upper here, all these weird little design choices. I'm just not sure they're required. I think you could probably simplify it and make the shoe a tiny bit lighter. 290 grams, it's starting to get up there. People often say, Ed, why do you always go on about the weight? In the larger shoes, the weight just builds up so much. Ask Andy, the FOD runner. Ask Tim Gross. Any of those guys. Weight just increases so much in our larger sizes, and they start to become unmanageable. This is supposed to be a competition shoe, and at 290 grams, that's by far heavier than some of the other shoes out there right now. So on my initial review for upper, I'm going to give this 2.4 out of 3. On to midsole now. In terms of midsole, the closest thing that I can think of to this shoe is probably the Pegasus Turbo 2. You can really feel that Fuelcell midsole, but I would suggest there's something else going on in the midsole here. It does feel like you've got a couple of different foams there. I mean, the website maintains that there's a Pebax plate in the midsole. Whether it's this red section here, I don't know. I've trawled the internet looking for details about this shoe, but not a lot of stuff exists on it. Whatever the setup, underfoot feel was fantastic. This cushion here, but a nice response as you press down into that midfoot area. Really did feel nice on some really heavy, tired legs. Like the Turbo, it does feel really great at those higher paces, but where I pulled things back as a warm up and warm down on my run today, it really felt good at those easier paces too. Didn't feel clunky, it didn't feel strange, just felt really nice whatever pace I threw at it. Despite my depleted legs from assisting the carpet installer, he was missing his helper. I enjoyed 4 miles at my tempo pace, which is about 7 minutes 30 per mile, and then I had 1.5 miles either side of that at a easier pace. That was pretty much all I could manage towards the end, in fairness. That was about 8.15 per mile. I also felt a little bit of DNA from the Fuelcell Rebel in this shoe. You've got this strange side fin here in the midsole. Does it serve a purpose? It's very, very squashy and spongy. Is it a stability feature? An aesthetic feature? I don't know. Does anyone know? There is one very interesting feature, guys, that I do need to show you about this shoe. It has a cork insole. Or at least it's kind of cork effect. Very strange. Quite a light insole though, and it's reasonably cushioned underfoot. I'm not sure it's going to be challenging Saucony's Triumph 17 insole anytime soon though. Maybe it's to stop moisture absorption? Nonetheless, a fun and quirky design choice. So I enjoyed my initial run in the Speedrift from New Balance, despite my legs being zapped of all power by the evil carpet and furniture moving. A versatile vibe here, which you know that I like. For me, after my initial run in the New Balance Fuelcell Speedrift, I'm going to give this 2.7 out of 3. We've got to talk outsole now. Lots of triangular patterns here. You almost feel like you're wandering around the pyramids. Some of them are filled with rubber, and then you've got these other ones that aren't. It's very odd. There's different sort of levels of the triangle detail. Very different to most other outsoles that I've reviewed recently. I think it's gummy enough for articulate action, and then abrasive enough for pavement and dirt. Actually, it felt really good on dirt, this one. The more ridged parts of the outsole are focused around the midfoot area, and then in the rear of the shoe they're much shallower. And there's also a hollowed out section which appears to be directly underneath the heel. Very interesting stuff. I guess you could say that the outsole design does nod towards the Fuelcell TC, although it's a much more aggressive implementation. Overall, traction was certainly acceptable. I didn't feel too unstable over some slippery mud hazards. So it's going to be a score similar to the Peg 37 outsole, better than the Beacon 3. Not quite as good perhaps as the Run Fast 2. I'm going to give this an outsole score after my initial run of 2.7 out of 3. We're talking value now. Value is often where the wheels come off when I do an initial review, and at a retail price which is an eye-watering £180, more expensive than the Nike Pegasus Turbo 2 and only a tad cheaper than the Saucony Endorphin Pro. I mean, the Adidas Adizero Pro is £20 cheaper than this shoe and lighter in my size. Just seems somewhat costly for a shoe at 290 grams that's supposedly for racing and competition. 30 grams heavier than the Turbo 2 in my size and 40 grams heavier than the New Balance Fuelcell Rebel in my size. As I say, this shoe is listed in their competition lineup. Whether that's an error, I do not know, but does it really live up to some of the great race shoes that have been released recently from the likes of Asics, Saucony, Adidas and Nike? I think at retail price it's a really tough sell. Certainly a shoe that's kind of untested. Nobody else has seemed to have reviewed it as of yet. When something lands without a real fanfare, you wonder what's going on here. And as I say, even I have struggled to find solid information and details about it. It performed well enough on my initial run, but I've certainly got many a lighter shoe that's cheaper than this that performs in a similar fashion. So after my initial run, I'm going to give this a 2 out of 3 for value, which gives us a grand total of 9.8 out of 12. So we're just below the Fuelcell TC, above the Pegasus 37, and almost on par with the Rincon in my initial review score matrix. There will be a video on my scoring matrix very soon, documenting everything up to now. Maybe I can get some more use out of this one in terms of tempo runs and speed work in the near future. It's just such an odd looking shoe as well. Certainly aesthetically not one of my favourites. A musical interlude for you. Back in 2005, Brett Anderson and Bernard Butler reunited with a great album. They started up a project called The Tears, and their initial album, which I believe is the only one, is called Here Come the Tears. Tracks entitled Refugees and The Lovers are really fantastic. Two Creatures, I remember that one's very, very good as well. I've been listening to it recently and it reminded me just how great the combination is. Those two songwriters really did come up with some great stuff in their early days in Suede. So do check that one out, a little blast from the past, 15 years ago now. The Tears, Here Come the Tears. I hope you've enjoyed the video today. Thanks very much for tuning in. If you haven't done so already, please hit that subscribe button and click the bell for notifications of when new videos launch. It really does help the channel out massively if you give this video a thumbs up like and also share it with your running buddies. My name's EDDBUD and I'll be seeing you